Ben Miller checked his watch and sighed. He was already running 15 minutes late for an important client meeting, and traffic wasn't helping. His contracting business was finally picking up after months of struggle, and he couldn't afford to lose this potential kitchen renovation job. At 38, the lines around his eyes had deepened, not just from age, but from the constant worry of being both mom and dad to his 10-year-old son. Alex, come on, he muttered, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel as the light turned red again. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen, his elderly neighbor who watched Alex after school. Alex forgot lunch money again, it read. Ben closed his eyes for a second. How had he forgotten that this morning? Between making breakfast, helping with Alex's science project, and preparing for today's meeting, it had completely slipped his mind. He quickly texted back that he'd drop some money off later and thanked her for covering it today. Another thing to add to his never-ending to-do list. The light finally turned green and Ben took a shortcut through the park, hoping to save a few minutes. As he drove slowly along the park's edge, something caught his eye. A small figure sat hunched on a bench, shoulders shaking. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, crying her eyes out. Ben noticed how people walked past her. A jogger glanced her way but kept running. A woman on her phone barely registered the child's presence, and a group of teenagers laughed loudly, completely oblivious. Ben's first thought was to keep driving. He was late after all, and surely someone else would stop to help. The girl's parents were probably nearby. It wasn't his problem, but as he slowed at the stop sign, he looked in his rearview mirror. The girl's face was red and blotchy, her hands clutching a worn backpack to her chest like it was her only lifeline. Something in her expression, pure fear mixed with hopelessness, made his heart twist. It was the same look Alex had worn after his mom died 3 years ago. Damn it, Ben whispered, pulling over to the side of the road. The client would have to wait. He approached carefully, not wanting to scare her. Hey there, he said gently, stopping a few feet away. Are you okay? The girl's head snapped up and she shrank back, pressing herself against the bench. Her eyes, red-rimmed and puffy, darted around like she was looking for an escape route. I'm not going to hurt you, Ben said, crouching down to appear less threatening. My name's Ben. I noticed you're upset. Is there someone I can call for you? Your mom or dad? The girl sniffled, studying him with suspicion. She had dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her jacket was a size too small, the sleeves stopping well above her wrists. I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, she finally said, her voice barely audible. Ben nodded, staying where he was. That's really smart. How about this? We stay right here in this public place and I can help you find a police officer or someone to help you. Would that be okay? She hugged her backpack tighter. I don't know where Grandma is, she whispered, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Ben's phone buzzed again in his pocket, probably the client wondering where he was. He ignored it. You're here with your grandma? Did you get separated? The girl shook her head. They took her away in a big white van this morning. She couldn't wake up properly. Her lower lip trembled. I didn't know what to do, so I came to the park because it's near our apartment, but I don't have keys to get back in. Ben's stomach dropped. An ambulance. The girl's grandmother had been taken to the hospital, and somehow in the chaos this child had been left behind. What's your name? He asked softly. She hesitated, then whispered, Sophie. Sophie, it sounds like your grandma might be in the hospital. Is there anyone else we can call? Another family member or a neighbor? Sophie shook her head again. It's just me and Grandma. She says we're a team of 2. Her chin wobbled dangerously. Ben ran a hand through his hair, thinking quickly. Do you know which hospital they might have taken her to? I think it's the big one by the mall, Sophie said. I heard the people in the white van talking about Saint something. St. Mary's, Ben nodded. That makes sense. It's the closest hospital to this area. Sophie looked at him with a mix of hope and fear. Do you think Grandma is okay? Ben's heart ached for this little girl, alone and scared in a world suddenly turned upside down, something he understood all too well. I don't know, honey, but we can find out. Would you like me to help you get to the hospital to check on her? For the first time, Sophie's grip on her backpack loosened slightly. You'd do that? Of course, Ben said, surprised by how certain he felt. No one should have to worry about their family alone. His phone buzzed a third time. Without looking, he knew his chance at the kitchen renovation job was gone. Strangely, it didn't seem to matter much now. Before we go, I should probably call the police too. Ben said carefully. They need to know you're safe and they can help us figure things out. Terror flashed across Sophie's face. No, they'll take me away. That's what happened to Lily in my class when her mom got sick. She had to go live with strangers and she hated it. Ben recognized the fear in her eyes, the dread of being thrust into the system, of losing the last bit of stability in her world. It was the same fear that had kept him up nights after his wife's death, worried that he wouldn't be able to care for Alex properly, that someone might decide Alex would be better off elsewhere. Okay, how about this, he said, thinking on his feet. First, we go to the hospital and check on your grandma. Then we'll figure out the next steps together. I promise I won't let anyone just take you away. Deal? Sophie studied his face for what felt like a long time, as if trying to decide if he was telling the truth. Finally, she gave a tiny nod. Deal. Ben stood and offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Sophie slipped her small hand into his. The trust in that simple gesture nearly knocked the wind out of him. As they walked to his truck, Ben noticed the curious glances from passers-by. Now they paid attention. When a man was leading a crying child away, he felt a flash of anger at how easily Sophie had been overlooked when she was alone and in need. My son Alex is about your age, Ben said as he opened the passenger door for her. He's 10. How old are you? 8, Sophie replied, climbing in and immediately buckling her seatbelt. Almost 9, Ben nodded, going around to the driver's side. He texted Mrs. Chen to ask if Alex could stay for dinner, promising to pay her extra. Then he called the client and apologized, making up a story about a family emergency. It wasn't really a lie, he realized. It just wasn't his family. Not yet. As they pulled away from the curb, Sophie looked out the window at the park bench where she'd been sitting. Thank you for stopping, she said quietly. Everyone else just walked by like I was invisible. Ben glanced at her, this small, brave girl who'd been left alone in the world, and felt something shift inside him. He couldn't explain why he'd stopped when dozens of others hadn't, or why he felt so certain that helping her was the right thing to do, even as it complicated his already complicated life. Sometimes people get so busy with their own problems that they forget to look around, he said gently. But you weren't invisible, Sophie. I saw you. Sophie turned from the window and gave him the faintest ghost of a smile. It wasn't much, just a small upturn at the corner of her mouth, but it felt like the sun breaking through clouds after a storm. As they drove toward the hospital, Ben didn't know what they would find there, or what would happen next. He only knew that in stopping for this one crying child whom everyone else had ignored, he'd already crossed a line. There would be no going back to the life he'd been living just 30 minutes ago. And somehow, despite the uncertainty ahead, that felt exactly right. The automatic doors of St. Mary's Hospital slid open with a gentle whoosh. Ben felt Sophie's hand tighten around his as they stepped into the busy lobby. The antiseptic smell and fluorescent lighting made the girl shrink closer to his side. It's okay, Ben said softly. We'll find out about your grandma soon. The information desk was staffed by an older woman with silver-rimmed glasses and a no-nonsense expression. She looked up as they approached, her eyes moving between Ben and Sophie with obvious curiosity. How can I help you? She asked. We're looking for a patient who was brought in by ambulance this morning, Ben explained. This is her granddaughter. The woman's expression softened when she looked at Sophie. What's the patient's name, honey? Sophie looked up at Ben, then back at the receptionist. Rose Thompson. She's my grandma. The woman typed something into her computer. Yes, Rose Thompson was admitted this morning. She looked at Ben with sudden suspicion. And you are... Ben hesitated. I'm a friend. I found Sophie alone and upset. She didn't know where her grandmother had been taken. The receptionist's eyebrows rose. I see. And are you this child's legal guardian or family member? No, but I'm sorry, but I can only share patient information with family members. Her voice was firm. And I'll need to contact social services about the child. Hospital policy. Sophie's grip on Ben's hand became painful. He could feel her trembling. Please. Ben leaned forward, lowering his voice. Sophie has been through enough today. She just wants to know if her grandmother is okay. Can't you at least... Tell us that? The woman's face remained impassive. I understand, but rules are rules. If you'll take a seat, I'll make some calls. Ben led Sophie to a row of chairs, his mind racing. He hadn't thought this through. Of course, the hospital would have protocols for unaccompanied minors. What had he expected? Are they going to take me away? Sophie whispered, eyes wide with fear. Ben crouched down in front of her. I'm not going to let that happen, okay? I promised we'd figure this out together, and I meant it. A doctor in blue scrubs approached them. Are you here for Rose Thompson? She asked, glancing between them. Ben stood quickly. Yes, this is her granddaughter, Sophie. The doctor smiled kindly at Sophie. Hi there, I'm Dr. Patel. I've been looking after your grandma. Is she okay? Sophie's voice was barely audible. Dr. Patel pulled up a chair to sit at Sophie's level. Your grandma had what we call a stroke. That's when something blocks the blood flow to part of the brain. She's stable now, but she's sleeping a lot while her brain heals. Can I see her? Sophie asked. Dr. Patel glanced at Ben questioningly. I found Sophie alone at the park, Ben explained quickly. She didn't have anywhere to go after her grandmother was taken by ambulance. I see, Dr. Patel said, her expression concerned. Normally we'd need to contact social services in this situation. No, Sophie cried out. Please don't. They'll put me in a home with strangers. Dr. Patel looked troubled. Sophie, has there been a plan for situations like this? Did your grandmother ever talk about who would take care of you if she got sick? Sophie shook her head, tears filling her eyes again. No, it's just been me and Grandma since I was little. After Mom died, she trailed off, staring at her shoes. Ben felt a pang in his chest. Another child who had lost a parent too young, Dr. Patel sighed. Well, hospital policy requires us to notify social services when we have an unaccompanied minor, but, she added quickly, seeing Sophie's distress, I can take you to see your grandmother first. As they followed Dr. Patel through the corridors, Ben's phone rang. It was Mrs. Chen, probably wondering when he'd pick up Alex. He sent a quick text explaining he'd be later than expected. Rose Thompson's room was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors. The elderly woman looked small and frail against the white hospital sheets, an oxygen tube under her nose and an IV in her arm. Sophie approached the bed cautiously. Grandma? She whispered. Rose didn't stir, but the monitors showed a steady heartbeat. She can't hear me, Sophie said, her voice breaking. We don't know that for sure, Dr. Patel said gently. Many patients can hear even when they can't respond. You can talk to her if you'd like. Sophie climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed and leaned close to her grandmother's ear. Grandma, it's me. I'm here now. Please wake up soon, she whispered. Ben watched from the doorway, feeling like an intruder on this private moment, yet something held him there, a sense of responsibility he couldn't explain even to himself. Dr. Patel stepped into the hallway, and Ben followed. What happens now? He asked quietly. Ms. Thompson has had a severe stroke, Dr. Patel explained. She'll need extensive rehabilitation, possibly weeks or months. As for Sophie, she glanced back into the room. Social services will arrange emergency foster care until a more permanent solution can be found. Ben thought of Sophie's panic at the mere mention of foster care. He thought of the system, overworked, understaffed, and how easy it would be for one scared little girl to get lost in it. What if... Ben hesitated, hardly believing what he was about to suggest. What if I took care of her temporarily, just until her grandmother recovers or other arrangements can be made? Dr. Patel looked surprised. That's not typically how these situations work. There are background checks, home inspections. I'm a single dad, Ben said. I have a 10-year-old son. I own my home. I run my own business. I can provide references, whatever's needed. The words tumbled out, his decision solidifying as he spoke. This is highly unusual, Mr. Miller. Ben Miller. Mr. Miller, while I appreciate your concern, taking in a child you just met today is a serious commitment, and there are legal procedures that can't be bypassed. Before Ben could respond, a soft voice came from behind them. Please don't make me go with strangers. Sophie stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. I'm scared. Dr. Patel's professional demeanor softened. Oh, honey, I understand this isn't normal, Ben said, but nothing about today has been normal. Can we at least try? For Sophie's sake? After a long moment, Dr. Patel nodded. I'll speak with social services. They'll still need to do their assessments, but I'll recommend they consider your offer. No promises, 3 hours, countless forms. And several interviews later, Ben found himself driving home with Sophie in the passenger seat. A temporary emergency guardianship paper in his glove compartment. It wasn't permanent, far from it. but it would give them time to figure things out. "Are you sure your son won't mind?" Sophie asked, clutching her backpack. "Alex?" Ben smiled. "He's been begging for a sibling for years. He'll probably be thrilled to have someone to boss around." That earned him a small smile. When they pulled up to Ben's modest two-story home, the porch light was already on. Mrs. Chen opened the door before they even reached it, Alex peering curiously around her. "Dad, you're super late," Alex exclaimed, then noticed Sophie. "Who's that?" Ben put a gentle hand on Sophie's shoulder. "Alex, this is Sophie. She's going to be staying with us for a while. Her grandmother is in the hospital." Alex studied the girl for a moment, then said matter-of-factly, "That's rough. My mom died when I was 7. Do you like video games?" The simple acceptance of a child. Ben felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. Mrs. Chen raised her eyebrows at Ben, clearly wanting an explanation, but simply said, "Dinner's in the oven. I made extra." "Thank you," Ben said with genuine gratitude. "For everything." After Mrs. Chen left, the three of them sat around the kitchen table eating slightly overcooked lasagna. Ben watched as Alex chatted away, showing Sophie his collection of trading cards, seemingly unfazed by the sudden addition to their household. Later, after setting up the spare room with fresh sheets and finding an old t-shirt of Alex's for Sophie to sleep in, Ben called his sister Liz. "You did what?" she exclaimed after he explained the situation. "I know it sounds crazy," Ben admitted, keeping his voice low so the children wouldn't hear. "It doesn't sound crazy, Ben. It is crazy. You don't even know this girl. I know she needed help when no one else would give it. I know what it's like to be suddenly responsible for a kid when you're not prepared for it." Liz was quiet for a moment. "That's different. Alex is your son. And who does Sophie have right now?" Ben asked. "Her grandmother could be in recovery for months. What about your business? You're already stretched thin." Ben looked down the hallway where he could hear Alex showing Sophie his rock collection. "I'll figure it out." "I always do." After hanging up, Ben checked on the kids. They were both sitting on Alex's bedroom floor, a board game open between them. For a moment watching them, it almost looked normal, like Sophie had always been there. "Dad," Alex called, spotting him. "Sophie's never played Monopoly before. Can you believe it?" Ben smiled, leaning against the doorframe. "Well, we'll have to fix that, won't we?" As he watched them play, Ben wondered what he'd gotten himself into. There would be social worker visits, legal hoops, school arrangements, and who knew what else. His already complicated life had just become infinitely more so. Yet seeing Sophie smile for the first time, really smile, as Alex dramatically bemoaned landing on her property, Ben couldn't bring himself to regret the split-second decision he'd made at that park bench. Sometimes the biggest changes in life came from the smallest moments of choice. Ben didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, 2 children were safe and happy under his roof, and somehow, that made everything else seem manageable. Morning chaos in the Miller household had always been a carefully orchestrated dance. Ben had it down to a science: breakfast at 6:45, lunches packed by 7:10, teeth brushed by 7:25, and out the door by 7:30 to drop Alex at school before heading to his first job site of the day. But add one 8-year-old girl to the mix, and suddenly that rhythm fell apart. "Sophie, honey, we need to leave in 5 minutes," Ben called, frantically searching for his truck keys. "I can't find my other shoe," Sophie replied from the guest room that was quickly becoming hers. After 3 days with them, she still kept her backpack packed and ready to go, as if expecting to leave at any moment. Alex appeared in the kitchen, hair still sticking up despite Ben's reminder to comb it. "Dad, is Sophie coming to school with me today?" "Not yet, buddy. I've got to talk to the school district first." Ben finally spotted his keys under a pile of mail. "She's coming with me to work, and then we're visiting her grandma at the hospital." Sophie emerged from her room, both shoes finally on. Dark circles ringed her eyes. She'd had nightmares 2 nights in a row. "Will Grandma be awake today?" Ben's heart tightened. "I don't know, kiddo, but Dr. Patel says she's making progress." The social worker, Ms. Patterson, had been clear. The temporary guardianship was just that, temporary. She'd be checking in regularly, and Ben needed to demonstrate he could provide a stable environment for Sophie, while also facilitating her relationship with her grandmother. It was a delicate to balance. Somehow they made it out the door only 15 minutes behind schedule. After dropping Alex off with a hurried, "Be good," Ben headed to his work site with Sophie, who sat quietly in the passenger seat. "I'm sorry you have to come to work with me," Ben said, glancing over at her. "Not exactly exciting for a kid." "It's okay," Sophie said, tracing patterns on her backpack. "Grandma used to take me to work with her too before she got too tired to clean houses." Ben hadn't known Rose Thompson had been a housekeeper. There was so much he didn't know about Sophie and her life. "Well, my client today has a dog. A really friendly golden retriever. Think you can help keep him entertained while I finish installing some cabinets?" Sophie's face lit up. "Really? I love dogs." The morning went surprisingly well. Sophie sat reading a book Ben had grabbed from Alex's shelf, occasionally playing fetch with Buddy the retriever. Ben's client, a retired teacher named Mrs. Reynolds, took to Sophie immediately, even making her lunch. "She's a lovely girl," Mrs. Reynolds said quietly to Ben as Sophie played in the backyard with the dog. "So polite." "How long did you say you've known her?" Ben hesitated. "Not long, actually. It's complicated." Mrs. Reynolds studied him with knowing eyes. The best things in life usually are. By noon, they were back in the truck heading to St. Mary's. Sophie grew quieter the closer they got to the hospital. "What if Grandma never wakes up?" she finally asked, her voice small. Ben pulled into a parking space and turned to face her. "Sophie, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I promise you won't have to face it alone, okay?" She nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. Inside, they found Rose's room had been moved from the ICU to a regular ward, a good sign. When they entered, Ben stopped short. Rose Thompson's eyes were open and she was watching the door. "Grandma!" Sophie rushed forward. Rose's right hand lifted slightly, though her left remained motionless on the bed. She made a soft sound, not quite words, but definitely recognition. "You're awake." Sophie carefully hugged her grandmother, mindful of the tubes and wires. Ben hung back, giving them space. He caught fragments of Sophie's excited chatter. "Staying with Ben and Alex, they have a big bookshelf, made pancakes yesterday." A nurse entered and smiled at the scene. "She woke up early this morning," she explained to Ben. "She can't speak clearly yet, and there's paralysis on her left side, but she's responsive." "That's wonderful," Ben said, genuinely relieved. The nurse lowered her voice. "Are you family? I don't think I've seen you before." "No, I'm—" Ben paused. What was he exactly? "I'm taking care of her granddaughter temporarily." The nurse's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "The doctor will want to speak with you before you leave." Dr. Patel confirmed what the nurse had suggested. Rose was making progress, but her recovery would be long and difficult. She would need extensive rehabilitation and wouldn't be able to care for Sophie for months, if ever to the same extent as before. "We need to discuss long-term plans for the child," Dr. Patel said gently. Ben looked through the door's window at Sophie, who was showing her grandmother a drawing she'd made. "I know. The social worker is coming for a home visit tomorrow." That evening, after a dinner of hastily ordered pizza, Ben sat at his kitchen table surrounded by paperwork. School enrollment forms, medical authorization documents, financial assistance applications. The bureaucracy involved in temporarily caring for a child was staggering. His phone buzzed with a text from his biggest client. "Need update on Parker project." "Behind schedule?" Ben rubbed his eyes. He was behind on everything. The Parker kitchen renovation should have been finished 2 days ago, but he'd had to reschedule work hours around Sophie. His sister Liz had offered to watch her occasionally, but she worked full-time too. A small voice interrupted his thoughts. "Ben, are you mad that I'm here?" He looked up to find Sophie standing in the doorway, wearing the 2 big pajamas they'd picked up at a discount store. "What? No, of course not," Ben said, pushing the paperwork aside. "Why would you think that?" Sophie shrugged, looking down at her bare feet. "You look worried all the time, and I heard you talking to your sister on the phone about money." Ben silently cursed himself for not being more careful about his conversations. "Come here," he said, patting the chair next to him. Sophie climbed up, her feet dangling above the floor. "I'm not mad and I'm not worried about money because of you," Ben explained. "Running a business and taking care of a family is just complicated sometimes. But that's adult stuff, not kid stuff. Grandma always said I'm an old soul," Sophie said solemnly. "I can help more. I'm good at cleaning." Ben's chest tightened. This little girl, worried about being a burden when her whole world had been turned upside down. "Sophie, listen to me," he said, turning to face her fully. You don't need to earn your place here. You don't need to clean or worry about money or anything else. Your job is just to be a kid, okay? Her eyes, too serious for her years, studied his face. But what if they take me away? Ms. Patterson said this was only temporary. The question hung in the air between them. Ben had been asking himself the same thing. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, he admitted. But I do know that I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you're safe and happy. That's a promise. Sophie seemed to consider this. Alex said you never break promises. Alex is right about that, Ben smiled. Now I think it's past your bedtime, young lady. The next day brought Ms. Patterson for her first official home visit. Ben had spent the morning cleaning frantically while Sophie was at the hospital with Liz visiting her grandmother. Mr. Miller, Ms. Patterson said, shaking his hand firmly, I'd like to see Sophie's sleeping arrangements and then have a private conversation. If you don't mind. Ben showed her the guest room, now with a few touches to make it more child-friendly. A nightlight, some books from the library, and a stuffed bear Alex had insisted on giving Sophie. It's small but comfortable, Ben explained, suddenly seeing his modest home through a stranger's eyes. And what about school arrangements? Ms. Patterson asked, making notes on her clipboard. I've submitted the enrollment paperwork. They're processing it and she should be able to start next week. In the meantime, she's been coming to work sites with me or staying with my sister. Ms. Patterson nodded noncommittally. And your work schedule? I understand you're self-employed. The questions continued, each one making Ben increasingly aware of how precarious their situation was. His work hours were irregular. His income fluctuated month to month. His support system consisted mainly of his sister and an elderly neighbor. Mr. Miller, Ms. Patterson said finally, setting down her clipboard. I appreciate what you're trying to do here. It's admirable. But I have to consider what's best for Sophie long-term. Ben felt his stomach drop. She's doing well here. She and Alex get along great and she's visited her grandmother every day. And what happens 3 months from now? 6 months? If Miss Thompson requires permanent residential care, are you prepared to become Sophie's long-term guardian? The question caught Ben off guard. He'd been taking things day by day, focused on the immediate challenges. He hesitated. This isn't just about providing a bed and meals, Mr. Miller. This is about committing to a child who has already experienced significant trauma and loss. Ms. Patterson's voice softened slightly. Children need stability. Before Ben could respond, the front door opened and Liz's voice called out, We're back! Sophie appeared in the doorway, her face brightening when she saw Ben. Guess what? Grandma said my name today. The speech therapist was there and she helped her say Sophie. The joy on her face was transformative. For a moment, she wasn't a displaced child in temporary care. She was just a little girl, excited about her grandmother's progress. Ms. Patterson watched the interaction carefully, as Ben knelt to hear all about the hospital visit. When Sophie ran off to find Alex, the social worker picked up her clipboard again. I'll be back next week, Mr. Miller. In the meantime, I suggest you give serious thought to what your long-term intentions are here. After she left, Ben stood in his living room, listening to the sounds of children playing down the hall. Miss Patterson was right. He needed to think beyond day-to-day survival mode. But every time he tried to imagine Sophie leaving, something inside him rebelled against the idea. Somewhere along the way, in just a few short days, this little girl had carved out a space in their lives that now seemed impossible to fill any other way. 2 months could change everything. Ben realized this as he stood at the back of the school auditorium, watching Sophie walk onto the stage with her class. She looked different now, her hair neatly braided, thanks to YouTube tutorials Ben had studied late at night, wearing a new dress, on sale, but still a splurge for their tight budget, and most noticeably, smiling with confidence that hadn't been there 8 weeks ago. Dad, can you see? Alex whispered loudly, standing on tiptoes next to him. Sophie's in the front row. I see her, buddy, Ben said, lifting his phone to record the second-grade music performance. Sophie had practiced This Land Is Your Land endlessly at home, sometimes with Alex providing dramatic backup vocals. When the children began to sing, Ben felt a tightness in his chest, that had become familiar lately, a mixture of pride, affection, and lingering uncertainty about the future. A text message buzzed in his pocket. Probably Liz, who was running late. But when he glanced down, he saw it was from Rose's rehabilitation center. Physical therapy session went well. Rose asking for both of you? Both of you? Not just Sophie, but Ben too. Over the past weeks, as Rose had gradually regained her speech and some movement on her right side, Ben had become a regular visitor. At first it had been awkward. What do you say to a woman whose granddaughter you've suddenly taken responsibility for? But Rose's dry humor and obvious love for Sophie had quickly broken down those barriers. After the performance, Sophie ran to them, eyes bright with excitement. "Did you see me?" "I didn't forget any words." "You were the best one up there," Alex declared loyally. "You were wonderful," Ben agreed, giving her a quick hug. "And guess what? Your grandma had a good therapy session today. She wants us to visit." Sophie's face lit up even more. "Can we go now, please?" "Homework first," Ben reminded her gently. "Then hospital." It had taken time to establish routines, but they had them now. School drop-offs and pickups, homework before play, hospital visits 3 times a week, and Ben's work scheduled around it all somehow. It wasn't perfect. Ben's business was barely staying afloat with his reduced hours. But they were managing. At home, Sophie immediately spread her homework across the kitchen table, while Alex reluctantly did the same. Ben checked messages from clients while starting dinner. Spaghetti, the one meal both kids would eat without complaint. "Ben," Sophie called from the table. "What's the difference between a noun and a verb again?" "A noun is a person, place, or thing. A verb is an action word," Ben replied, stirring the sauce. It still felt strange sometimes, helping with another child's homework, making decisions about her daily life, becoming the person she turned to with questions. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. Ben wiped his hands and went to answer it, finding Ms. Patterson on the porch, clipboard in hand as always. "Mr. Miller, I hope this isn't a bad time," she asked, though they both knew it didn't really matter. Social workers didn't operate on convenience. "No, come in. We're just doing homework and making dinner." Ben stepped aside, mentally reviewing the state of the house. Was it clean enough? Were there enough vegetables planned for dinner? Had he signed all of Sophie's school forms? Ms. Patterson entered, nodding hello to the children before turning to Ben. "I was hoping we could talk privately." Ben's stomach tightened. "Kids, keep working on homework." "I'll be in the living room with Ms. Patterson." In the living room, Ms. Patterson didn't waste time. "Mr. Miller, it's been 2 months since the temporary guardianship was established. I've been in contact with Ms. Thompson's doctors." Ben nodded, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "While she's making progress, it's clear she won't be able to resume full care of Sophie. The rehabilitation center is recommending long-term care facility placement once she's stabilized." Even though he'd expected this, hearing it officially made Ben's heart sink. "What does that mean for Sophie?" Ms. Patterson adjusted her glasses. "That's what we need to discuss. The temporary arrangement was meant to be just that, temporary. We need to consider permanent placement options." "What kind of options?" Ben asked, though he already knew. "Foster care with the possibility of adoption, primarily. There are several qualified families in our system who could provide Sophie with a stable home." Ben felt something fierce rise in his chest. "She has a stable home here." Ms. Patterson studied him. "Mr. Miller, when we began this arrangement, you were hesitant to commit long-term. Your financial situation is precarious. You're a single parent already raising 1 child, and you have no prior connection to Sophie." Each point landed like a blow, but Ben couldn't argue with the facts. His latest bank statement showed how close to the edge they were running. "However," Ms. Patterson continued, "I've observed Sophie's adjustment here. She's thriving in school, maintaining her relationship with her grandmother, and has clearly bonded with both you and Alex." She set down her clipboard. "If you're interested in becoming Sophie's permanent guardian, the department would consider your application." Ben blinked, surprised by the shift. "You think they'd approve me?" "I think Sophie's best interest is my priority," Ms. Patterson said carefully. "And stability, continuity of care, and emotional attachment are significant factors. But you would need to demonstrate financial stability and long-term commitment." After she left, Ben stood in the hallway, listening to the children's voices from the kitchen as they worked through homework together. Alex was explaining multiplication to Sophie with exaggerated patience, making her giggle. Permanent guardian. The words echoed in his head as he returned to the kitchen. "Is everything okay?" Sophie asked, looking up with those 2 perceptive eyes. "Everything's fine," Ben assured her, returning to the stove. "Finish up that homework so we can visit your grandma." At the rehabilitation center, Rose was sitting up in a wheelchair, her left side still largely immobile, but her right hand busy with a stress ball the therapist had given her. Her face brightened when they entered. "There's my girl," she said, her speech slightly slurred but understandable now. "And my boys, my boys." The casual inclusion struck Ben deeply. While Sophie told her grandmother all about the school performance, Ben found himself studying Rose's face, seeing echoes of Sophie in her features. They had the same determined chin, the same expressive eyebrows. "She looks happy," Rose said quietly when Sophie and Alex wandered off to get sodas from the vending machine. "I think she is," Ben replied. "Most of the time anyway. She still has nightmares sometimes." Rose nodded, her eyes following the children down the hall. "The social worker came to see me yesterday, Ms. Patterson. She asked how I'd feel about you becoming Sophie's permanent guardian." Ben felt his pulse quicken. "What did you say?" Rose turned to look at him directly. "I said that when a man stops his truck to help a crying child everyone else ignored, that tells me everything I need to know about his character." Her right hand trembled slightly as she reached for his. "I can't be what she needs anymore, Ben. The doctor says I'll need assisted living for the foreseeable future." "Rose, Let me finish," she insisted. "I've spent 2 months watching you with her. You've given her stability when her world was falling apart. You've brought her to see me faithfully. You've helped with her schoolwork, learned to braid her hair, and treated her like she belongs in your family." Her eyes glistened. "I couldn't ask for more than that." Ben swallowed the lump in his throat. "I don't know if I can do it. Financially, I mean. Business has been slow, and with the reduced hours, the world has a way of providing for people who do the right thing," Rose said firmly, "one way or another." That night, after the kids were asleep, Ben sat at his kitchen table with a calculator, bank statements, and a growing sense of impossibility. The numbers simply didn't add up. Between mortgage payments, utilities, food for 3 people, and the extra costs that came with raising children, his contracting income wasn't enough, especially with the hours he'd cut back to care for Sophie. A soft knock on the back door startled him. Mrs. Reynolds, his former client, stood on the porch. "I'm sorry to disturb you so late," she said when he opened the door, "but I wanted to drop this off." She handed him a thick envelope. Ben opened it, confused, and found a check for an amount that made his eyes widen. "What is this?" "My husband and I are renovating our vacation home," Mrs. Reynolds explained. "After seeing your work and meeting Sophie, we'd like you to handle the project. It's a complete kitchen and bath renovation." Ben stared at the check. "This is very generous, but—" "It's not charity, Ben," she interrupted. "It's an opportunity. My husband is on the board of Lakeside Home Developers. They're looking for reliable contractors for a new subdivision, 30 houses all needing finish work." "I don't understand," Ben said, still holding the check. "Why would you do this?" Mrs. Reynolds smiled. "Because 2 months ago I watched a man put a child's needs before his own business interests. That's the kind of person I want working on my home." She patted his arm. "The world needs more people who stop for crying children, Ben." After she left, Ben sat looking at the check for a long time. It wasn't a solution to everything, but it was a start. Enough breathing room to think beyond survival mode for the first time in months. The next morning, as he made school lunches, Sophie appeared in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "Ben?" she asked hesitantly. "Are you my dad now?" The question froze him mid-sandwich. "What makes you ask that?" Sophie fiddled with the hem of her pajama top. "Tommy at school said I'm like one of those kids from Annie without real parents. But then Lisa said if you take care of me and love me, that makes you my dad." She looked up with anxious eyes. "So are you?" Ben set down the knife and crouched to her level. "I'm not trying to replace your dad, Sophie. But I do take care of you and I do love you. Very much." "So what does that make you?" she persisted. What was he to this child who had arrived in his life by chance? Guardian was too formal. Caretaker too distant. Friend not enough. "I'm your Ben," he said finally. "And you're my Sophie. And we're a family, along with Alex and your grandma. Maybe not like other families, but still a family." Sophie considered this, then nodded solemnly. "I think I like that better than Annie anyway." Ben laughed, pulling her into a hug that she returned fiercely. Over her shoulder, he saw Alex watching from the doorway, a small smile on his face. The moment wasn't a solution to their challenges. There would still be financial struggles, social worker visits, and difficult decisions ahead. But in that kitchen, with Sophie's arms around his neck and Alex's quiet approval, Ben knew with certainty what his next step would be. It was time to make their unconventional family official. 1 year to the day after Ben had stopped at that park bench, he stood in the courthouse hallway straightening Alex's tie and smoothing Sophie's dress. Both kids were fidgeting with excitement. "Remember," Ben said, kneeling to check Sophie's hair bow, "the judge might ask you some questions. Just be honest, okay?" Sophie nodded solemnly. At 9 years old now, she'd grown an inch and gained a confidence that made her seem taller. "I practiced with Grandma yesterday." Rose sat nearby in her wheelchair, dressed in her Sunday best. The past year had been hard on her physically. The stroke had left her left side permanently weakened, but her mind remained sharp as ever. She'd moved into Golden Oaks assisted living 3 months ago, in an apartment just 10 minutes from Ben's house. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but she'd adapted with remarkable grace. "You'll do fine, sweetheart," Rose assured Sophie. "We all will." The courtroom doors opened and Ms. Patterson emerged. Her usual clipboard was absent, replaced by a slim folder. After a year of home visits, paperwork, and evaluations, today was finally the day. "They're ready for you," she said, offering a rare smile. Inside, the family courtroom was less intimidating than Ben had feared. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes, watched as they took their places. "We're here today for case number 47892, the matter of guardianship for Sophie Thompson," she announced. "I've reviewed the case file thoroughly. Mr. Miller, you're petitioning for permanent legal guardianship, is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ben replied, his voice steadier than he felt. The judge looked through her papers. "I see the department's recommendation is positive, and Ms. Rose Thompson, the grandmother and previous guardian, has given written consent." She glanced at Rose. "Ms. Thompson, is that still your wish today?" Rose nodded firmly. "Absolutely, Your Honor. Ben has been Sophie's true guardian in every way that matters for the past year. We're just making it official." The judge turned her attention to Sophie. "Young lady, I'd like to hear from you too. How do you feel about Mr. Miller becoming your legal guardian?" Sophie stood up straight just as she'd practiced. "Ben saved me when I was lost and scared. He takes care of me, helps me with homework, and makes sure I visit Grandma 3 times every week. He learned how to braid my hair even though he's not very good at it." This brought soft laughter from around the room. "And Alex is the best brother ever. We're already a family. We just need the paper that says so." Alex nodded vigorously beside her. The judge smiled. "Well, I think that's as clear an endorsement as I've ever heard." She signed the document in front of her with a flourish. "By the power vested in me by the state, I hereby grant permanent legal guardianship of Sophie Thompson to Benjamin Miller." She banged her gavel lightly. "Congratulations to your family." Sophie let out a little squeal and threw her arms around Ben's waist. Alex joined the hug from the other side. "We did it, Dad," Alex exclaimed. Ben felt a lump form in his throat as he hugged them both. "We sure did, buddy." Outside the courthouse, Rose waited with a small box in her lap. "I have something for all of you," she said when the children rushed up to her. Inside the box were 3 matching bracelets, simple braided leather with a small silver charm on each. "The charm is a park bench," Rose explained as Ben examined his, "to remind us where your story together began." That evening, they celebrated with a backyard barbecue. The modest house that had once felt too small for just Ben and Alex now comfortably embraced their expanded family. Rose sat in her wheelchair under the shade of the old maple tree, watching as neighbors and friends gathered around the picnic tables Ben had built last month. Mrs. Chen brought her famous spring rolls, Mrs. Reynolds, and her husband came with an enormous cake decorated with the words "officially family." Liz chased the children around the yard with a water sprayer, making them shriek with delight. Ben flipped burgers on the grill, occasionally glancing around at the scene with a sense of wonder. His life had changed in ways he never could have imagined that day in the park. His contracting business had not only survived, but thrived. The Lakeside project had led to steady work, allowing him to hire 2 employees. He'd even started a side business, specializing in accessibility modifications for homes, inspired by the ramps and adaptations he'd built for Rose's apartment. "Penny, for your thoughts," said a voice beside him. Ben turned to find Karen Walker, the children's school counselor handing him a cold drink. Over the past year, she'd become a friend, and recently perhaps something more. Her steady presence and quiet understanding had been a lifeline during the most challenging parts of the guardianship process. Just thinking about how different everything is from a year ago, Ben admitted, accepting the drink. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just kept driving that day. Karen followed his gaze to where Sophie was teaching Alex and some neighborhood kids a complicated clapping game. But you didn't keep driving, she said simply. That's who you are. Later, as twilight settled over the yard and guests began to leave, Ben found Sophie sitting next to Rose's wheelchair, their heads close together in quiet conversation. The similarity in their profiles struck him anew. The same determined chin, the same thoughtful eyes. "What are you two plotting over here?" he asked, sitting down beside them. "Grandma was telling me about when my mom was little," Sophie said. "She says I laugh just like her." Ben nodded. "That's a wonderful thing to know." Rose patted Sophie's hand. "I was also telling her that families come in all shapes and sizes. Some you're born into, some you find along the way. Both kinds are real." After Rose had been taken home by her caregiver and the children had finally been persuaded to go to bed, Ben sat alone on the back porch steps. The night was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic and the occasional barking of the neighbor's dog. He fingered the leather bracelet on his wrist, thinking about the strange winding path that had led him here. A split-second decision to stop for a crying child had set in motion events that transformed not just Sophie's life, but his and Alex's too. The kitchen door creaked open behind him. "Dad?" Alex stood there in his pajamas. "Can't sleep." "Me neither," Ben admitted. "Too much excitement today." Alex sat down beside him on the steps. At 11, he was getting lanky, all elbows and knees. "Do you think Sophie's mom would be okay with us being Sophie's family now?" he asked unexpectedly. Ben put his arm around his son's shoulders. "I think any parent would want their child to be safe and loved if they couldn't be there themselves. Don't you?" Alex nodded thoughtfully. "Like how you always say Mom would be proud of me when I do good stuff." Exactly like that. They sat in companionable silence for a while. "Hey, Dad?" "Yeah, buddy? I'm really glad you stopped that day. For Sophie, I mean." Ben hugged him closer. "Me too, Alex, me too." The next morning was a Saturday, which meant pancakes, a tradition that had survived all the changes of the past year. Ben mixed batter while the kids set the table, their easy bickering about whose turn it was to get the syrup from the top shelf, a familiar soundtrack to the morning. The doorbell rang unexpectedly early. Ben opened it to find Ms. Patterson standing there, but without her usual clipboard. "I'm not here officially," she said, a bit awkwardly. "I just wanted to give Sophie something." She held out a small gift bag. Ben invited her in, calling the children from the kitchen. Sophie opened the bag carefully, pulling out a framed photograph. Her eyes widened. "It's me and Grandma. From before." The photograph showed a younger Rose, standing straight and strong with a small Sophie beside her, both smiling at the camera in front of what must have been their old apartment building. "We had it in your file," Ms. Patterson explained. "I thought you might want it for your new room." Sophie looked up with shining eyes. "Thank you." After Ms. Patterson left, declining the offer of pancakes, Sophie carefully placed the photograph on the mantel, next to the pictures of Alex as a toddler and Ben's late wife. "Now everyone's here," she declared with satisfaction. Ben looked at the mismatched collection of frames that somehow perfectly represented their unconventional family, past and present, blood relations and chosen ones all belonging together. "Yes," he agreed. "Everyone's here." Later that day, as they walked through the park to visit Rose, the same park where it had all begun, Sophie slipped her hand into Ben's. "Ben?" she asked suddenly. "Do you ever wish you hadn't stopped that day? When I was crying on the bench?" Ben squeezed her small hand gently. "Not even for a second, and it was true. All the challenges, the late nights worrying about money, the complicated logistics of their new life, none of it mattered compared to what they'd gained. A family didn't have to be